Hi, I'm Claudia Felsky. I'm here virtually to talk to you about technology and learning in the 21st century. So, first of all, I am a high school English teacher and a technology integration specialist. So I help teachers and students in my district meaningfully incorporate technology into their learning and teaching. I'm a certified trainer in Google Apps and Smartboard training. I was the 2011 Wisconsin High School Teacher of the Year, and I have UWM Connections. My teaching certification was post-bac in 1992, and I received my master's degree in creative writing in the year 2000. And I am also married to your UWM instructor, Mike Felsky. So that's my deal. There's my contact information. If you have any questions or want to contact me, feel free. So, you may recognize this famous literary character. It is Rip Van Winkle, and I didn't even realize Rip may stand for RIP, as in death. Until I did this presentation, I'm like, oh, Rip, RIP. But anyway, you may remember the story. The legend goes that he fell asleep under a tree on a Sunday afternoon, and he woke up 100 years later and didn't recognize anyone or anything. It was a completely different planet to him. And I think you could relate this to education and argue that if Rip Van Winkle fell asleep 100 years ago and woke up in the year 2013, he would wander around and he would see, people with little black devices that glued to their ears. He would see little figures running around on flat screens, and he wouldn't understand what these things are. However, there would be one place that he would certainly recognize, and that's a classroom. He would walk into a classroom, and there would most likely be straight rows of desks and a board, a chalkboard in front. It may be white now instead of black, but he would recognize the school. And the whole point is that society and our lives have changed dramatically, but the classroom has not. We're not up to speed, not even close. So, what are 21st century skills? What does 21st century learning entail? And we're going to stop right now and have you discuss what 21st century means. Okay, so in your discussion, maybe some of these terms, or at least concepts, came up. Things like global awareness, critical thinking, adaptability, collaboration, media fluency, entrepreneurship, innovation, synthesis, problem solving, creativity, curiosity. These terms that were not traditionally a part of teacher education or classroom practice, but are central to today's world, thriving in today's global society. So the question is, if that's the case, why are our classrooms the way they are and not 21st century savvy? And we can look to a couple things to think. One is Joe Farmer, because our traditional system is based on the agrarian calendar. In other words, we structure our school year after a cycle on a farm. So because students, aka children, were needed for the harvest, then we didn't have school in the summers. So a big part of the way we teach is based on the farming calendar. And another system that it is formed after is the assembly line that Henry Ford made famous. So if you think about the assembly line, where the cars went through this assembly line where workers would put a piece on at each station, and that was considered really super efficient and almost high tech for the time. Well, it was such a good idea, they thought that you could do the same thing with students. And if you think about your schedule right now as a student, this is still happening to you, right? As you go through your college classes, that you go from class to class, from room to room, and an expert puts a little piece of information or puts a part on you. Well, that's how our school system is based. So the problem is we have a much different kind of learner these days, and here's a little comic strip to illustrate that. It says, there aren't any icons to click. It's called a chalkboard, says the teacher. So that just illustrates the mismatch between their lives and our teaching methods. So research is starting to come out to show that the brains of today's young child is different than that of their teachers or parents. And this is called the cultural brain, processing information differently than we do, operating at twitch speed due to video games and hypertext and multitasking. And this cultural brain processes information much more quickly than prior generations and can consequently get bored much more quickly than prior generations. So here's a little video clip I want you to watch, and it deals with what they call digital natives. So we are digital immigrants. This, cell phones and computers in general, we weren't born with them. We learned to use them. And this generation is filled with digital natives that practically have a cell phone, metaphorically in utero. It's such a natural part of their lives. So take a look at this clip. So basically, we are teaching in the industrial age, the Henry Ford assembly line model, but we are living in the information age. So we clearly have a system that is a mismatch for the world in which our students live. So here's a picture of an entrepreneurial business in New York City that charges students $1 per day to babysit their cell phones. So this is basically daycare for cell phones because they are not allowed in the school building. Instead of being an integrated part of the students' lives because it is so central to them, we tear it out of their hands when they enter the classroom. So if they are living in a digital world, but we are living with an antiquated system of education, what should a 21st century classroom look like? What should 21st century teaching be? So let's stop now and discuss. So I'm not sure what you talked about, but was technology involved? Were straight rows of desks involved, or was there a more collaborative kind of grouping? So I hope your discussion was rich. And the question then remains, why aren't we moving toward that kind of model? What is the biggest barrier to making 21st century classrooms? And the response that I kind of gather as I read about these things, that there are a couple different initiatives that kind of cover what's going on in education. One is a big drive. It's called Back to the Basics. So instead of embracing newer technology and different ways of thinking and working, there's a big drive to go back to the basics, which is really another way of saying more of the same, or if it's not working, just say it louder and slower, not doing it differently. And there we go. Einstein says, he calls this insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. But that's what we're doing in education. Our reform movements really are more of the same. So we are in essence teaching students how to ride a horse and then expecting them to know how to drive a car. This is a problem. So central questions as you think about teaching and entering your teaching career. These are some questions that I ask myself and try to make myself cognizant of as I teach. So here's the first one. How are my students different than they were 5 years ago? And if you figure that out, a related question should be, how is my teaching different than it was 5 years ago? And ultimately, am I in touch with the next generation of digital natives? So here's an interesting character, and this is the second video clip that I want you to watch, and he has a very strong and clear message for you when he asks, are you going to be my teacher? So I want you to be haunted by that little voice and that big voice and that little face, and also by the other picture up here, um, a college student who has an open letter to educators. I want you to think about what he's saying. So here we are, the third video, an open letter to educators. So before I have you think about this closing question, I just want to tell you that this is a bit of a backdrop to my 20 years in education and what I'm trying to do in my own classroom, using technology, leveraging technology to try to reach our digital natives and try to teach in a way that is congruent with 21st century learning. So the next time I talk to you, which is going to be in about 2 weeks, I'm going to share with you more specifics of what I do in my classroom. And I hope to ultimately meet up with you in a Google Hangout and discuss some of these issues. So please jot down any questions that you have for me. I would love to incorporate them into our next chat. So my closing question, what can you do in your classroom to meet their needs, these two students who spoke to you, and their expectations? And with that, thank you for listening, and I hope to chat with you live soon. Bye.